Plated Traditions Channel. Welcome to the Plated Traditions Channel with your host Kendra Moses. This is the Plated Traditions.
Hello and welcome to the Plated Traditions Channel. My name is Kendra Moses, and as always, we're our resident Chef Kai off camera. Now today is Valentine's Day, and today reminds me of what it means to be a tradition. The one vital thing about many traditions is that it's hard to really discern where they actually came from. We discern the point in time where we decided, or it was recorded, that this is what we're going to be doing from this point on. And this could be off the basis of any cultural beliefs or any religious beliefs or any familiar traditions. It really doesn't matter. It's just most traditions end up having a way of starting themselves without really having any idea that I guess it would be a tradition. And that's what makes them so interesting. When we realize as we get to a point in time where we say, oh, we've been doing this for so long now, and then it automatically defines itself as a tradition, something that we just start to do on a monthly basis, a yearly basis, a daily basis, just because it has been done before and has been done so many years before that it just stuck. It was one of those things to just get their foot in the door and it sticks. Now, Valentine's Day is no different. And I say it's the epitome of tradition because as much as it's revered, as much as it's adorned and practiced, to really say that you know exactly where it came from, its origin, is very difficult to do. It is very hard to discern what exactly made this a trend, not only for us here in the United States, but for other countries around the world. When did they say that February the 14th will be this day that we will celebrate for couples and love and all these other things that we have placed underneath this word Valentine's? In the true plated tradition sense as well, it has something to do with a festival of agriculture. If we are to accept that, like everything else, it started in the ancient Roman times, which, why not? So many other things that we celebrate and carry on to this day started in the ancient Roman times. They have had a hand in basically everything that we have done throughout the course of our life. For all traditions, it ends up showing us that even though we try to say we are our own people, we do our own paths and create our own travels in life, we still end up being so connected. The fact that we're all doing very similar things, no matter how much we try to differentiate ourselves between ourselves or between any of the other animal kingdoms. Because everything we end up doing, everything we started doing, derived from all those things I just discussed just now. Everything is connected. So if we think about mythology, and I love Greek and Roman mythology, we're talking about ancient Rome though for Valentine's Day. There was a festival for agriculture, amongst other things, but this festival was basically centered on fertility. And the festival is called Lupercalia. Lupercalia, they had what they refer to now as pagan rituals. But pagan, I want you to understand, pagan doesn't necessarily mean evil or witchcraft. It just basically means it wasn't part of a organized religion that we know of now, like Christianity or what have you. Interesting thing about traditions and cultures and belief systems is that basically with the utmost respect, all of our belief systems can easily be placed into a category of mythology. If someone doesn't have your particular belief system, which you know to be true and to be the focal point or the gears of life, can end up placing your belief system into a mythological point of view for somebody else. And I still think it deserves credence, because if this is how we started out, if this is how we decided from looking at the stars and the sky above, and we just started to interpret things our way and to get some sort of understanding and get some sort of acceptance of the world around us, why not? I mean, it really not hurting anyone whatsoever, and it's made for a good read and made for an interesting point of view to see how thought patterns were, or our thought patterns still are, and how far back they range, and how much credence we give it now, and we should still give it now, whether or not it's a particular belief system. Because most of everything that we do today is based on those belief systems of so many years ago. Back to the festival. So the festival is called Lupercalia. And so Lupercalia is a festival based on fertility. And while this may sound questionable to some today, I have to still focus on the connection. We tell ourselves that we are so far removed from certain civilizations, yet we still do the same things or look to creatures of different species to potentially do the same thing. So what do I mean by this? Now for Faunus. Now Faunus is a Roman god for agriculture. But Faunus had an animal-like appearance. And we think about today, there is a word still around called fauna. We talk about the flora and fauna. Now when we reference the flora and fauna, we're referencing the flora, the plant life, and the fauna, the animal life. So we're thinking about things still at the same base level. But we were thinking about the process of being fertile, at least for this particular festival, Lupercalia. Yes, the concentration was based on having a fertile human body. But we also reference our earth to the same attribute. When we're talking about the land being fertile, we're not talking about a whole bunch of people on the land who are able to child rear and bear. We're talking about the land itself is able to be sown with seed and produce life. Why is this important? This is important because as we go along the timeline about where did Valentine's Day even come from? So when we continue, we go past Lupercalia, our festival that was celebrated the midway point of February, around February 15th. And we continue down the timeline of what is Valentine's Day and how did it continue to be. We find ourselves now in the Middle Ages. Now we're talking about France and England. And again, they noticed that during the midway point of February, around February 14th, 15th, this is when the birds' mating season starts. And what have we done today? We have carried on the tradition of saying the lovebirds. Anyone mentions the lovebirds now is automatically synonymized with not just the birds, but with us as well. Noticing that was the mating period of the birds during that time and in those locations, they started to say, well, maybe there should be inspiration for this to be a mating season for us as well. And we find ourselves trying to differentiate ourselves from the other animal kingdoms, but there's really not much difference when it comes to that basic instinct. But in any case, when it's all said and done, we have found ourselves tying ourselves into ancient civilizations, tying ourselves in with the habits of other species, tying ourselves in with the habits of people of other faith base. And that's the evolution of tradition. But for Valentine's Day, it still doesn't stop there, because still, why do we call it Valentine's Day? That is the main question now. Now, the thing about Valentine's Day, as we move along the timeline of, again, what is Valentine's Day and why is it called Valentine's Day, we've answered the question about why it's celebrated around the 14th or on the 14th today, because it had been a constant thing to be celebrated around the 14th and 15th from the ancient Roman times through to the Middle Ages. But now we're in the time of the 1400s in Christianity. And now we're talking about priests. And these priests basically got our attention, or got the attention enough to have a holiday namesake for them because they were martyred. They shared the name Valentine. These priests had made themselves history by doing things that most would say were based off romance. For one of the priests named Valentine, he was imprisoned. It was said that in his final days that he had become infatuated with the young lady, and he wrote her a bit of a love letter, and it was signed from your Valentine. And then another telling about the priest Valentine, the specific reason for him being imprisoned and ultimately martyred is because he would marry off young couples. So against the emperor's will, the priest continued to marry the young couples in secret until he was found out. And at that point in time, he was imprisoned and then ultimately martyred. The way that we now depict Valentine's Day now seems quite romanticized as opposed to romantic. And so we've taken a holiday that, even though is said to be drawn from what they want to call pagan roots, we were seeing a civilization who was okay with what was going on because that was their belief system. It wasn't like strange or odd to them. It wasn't like any type of forced nature, especially for these women who wanted to be fertile because they wanted to rear a child. And they wanted to be paired off with a eligible suitor. And then we go forward to the Middle Ages, where they looked at a species that maybe during that time they had more respect for the animals. Because now in this time period, we question whether or not an animal is cognizant or an animal is aware about any type of feeling or emotion. In the Middle Ages, they took that mating season as something that was quite romantic. And they passed that on. And they not only passed on that trend of trying to be with someone within their own species, but to be with someone in a similar fashion as the birds were. They found a sense of romance in it. And then we get to the time frame where Valentine's Day was actually named for. The romance seems to take a slight twist to romanticism. It's interesting how the people who gave this holiday their namesake, it wasn't very romantic, but it was romanticized enough. Someone could see, again, we're still looking at a time period of people, but they could see the romance enough to say, well, from now on, how about we all sign our letters of love and affection as Valentine. But in any regards, no matter how this holiday got its name, to think about it keeping a tradition for so long. Even though it wasn't really succinct, it wasn't like directly passed down from anyone in particular. It's just something that was basically instilled in us as human beings. And it's just a sentiment that was instilled in us as human beings. And Valentine's, if I'm honest, it sounds like a very natural name now. There's something about Valentine's Day that not only ties into the whole epitome and the thought process and the ideology of tradition itself, because it's something that has been passed down. It's not something that's trying to be particularly anything other than what it is. We ourselves, we might romanticize it, but the whole holiday itself, what it embodies, what it's been through, it's basically just doing what it's meant to do. And it almost seems like more of an entity than a creation. And it makes sense in a sense, because we think about the missioning of Father Time like we have before on this program. Because time is something that we don't imagine creating. It would be impossible, because ideally time had to exist before us. Without the passing of time, events would never have passed that made us be what we are today. Valentine's Day carries a sentiment. It's very similar to that of time, being that we don't necessarily have to give love a romantic connotation. So along with that beginnings of the whole process of it starting as a festival for fertility, and then going to the Middle Ages and looking at the mating properties of the birds, to us calling it now a holiday based off the love or the trials and tribulations of love, if you will, from a martyred priest. When we think about it, there's nothing to say that love has to be this carnal cessation or this romantic cessation of being like in a romantic relationship. So if we just think about the holiday representing the God that is represents now, we still use Cupid. And Cupid is the Roman god for love. And love doesn't necessarily have to be a thing. Or it's not necessarily a thing and just being couples. Whether or not they use the word love, or whatever they use for the word love, whether or not they actually had succinct languages, we think about at least our renditions of ourselves. Even when we don't want to give credit to any other animal kingdom, we think about the renditions of ourselves. And I have a hard time believing that they did not have some sort of feeling of affection or caring for one another. And it could be, like I said, just the love for a parent and child, or an elder and their descendants. And it doesn't necessarily, like I said, have to be this romantic kissy-kissy connotation, because love is very much so more intricate and has more identity, just as this holiday does. So it seems fitting that it's even associated with it. So when you think about Valentine's Day, even though it's marketed to the couples and romance and the whole mating thing, if you just think about it as a day for expressing and feeling and acknowledging the things that you truly love in this life. And that could be as simple as a meal, your favorite, you love this certain food. It never fails you. You always love this certain food. That is something to be acknowledged. When you say you love a certain name, and the name does not have to be associated with the person that you love. It's just something that we do as human beings. We find fixations and affections for things, and they don't necessarily have to be an actual another human being or living life. We are very capable too of personifying things, down to food, to names, and it's something that I think we let get overshadowed by this whole premise that it has to be a thing about reproducing, or it has to be a thing about having this picture as ideal of what a mainstream or a marketer says love is supposed to represent on this day. When we think back to the ancient times and the Romans, and it focused on Faunus, and he was the god of agriculture. And like I said, the floral and fauna, if you ever heard that saying, they're just talking about the plants and the animals, the two main things that really inhabit our world, that gives our world meaning and life.
We, the angels, across the behalf of St. Valentine, show us your love and your traditions. The Play Traditions Recipe Journal, available at Amazon.com and Blurb.com. Just use keywords Play Traditions Recipe Journal. Happy Valentine's.
L.O.V. is coursing all through me. The love for the food puts me in a good mood. Swear it's all that I need to brighten my day. Pasta, pizza, calamari. There's hardly any food that's getting past me. Hot cookies, brownies, and cake. I don't know what to make, but with the love for the food, it's all on the take. Buffer around, but got my heart on the quake. Buffer around, making up bends. Searching for tasty fiddles, gotta keep up the pace. Something to be best, got in my pace. And when the fodder getting hotter, I still got it in my face. Got that love for food, not letting it go to waste. Coursing through me, all set up working on my recipes, and play the tradition as I know what's it gonna be. L.O.V. it's got a hold over me.
Thank you again for joining us for another week. We hope to see you again next time. Bye bye.
Let them dance,